It's been a minute since we've done a tank deep dive on this channel, and today we have a good one. We are looking at the AMX 13 series light tanks, more specifically the AMX 13 105. Most notably, this is the first tank on this channel that actually existed and saw combat, and there were close to 100 variants of these tanks made, ranging from 1952 to 1985, and they're still in use in some small countries today. Let's look at what made this small French light tank so popular. Just like the other French tank we looked at, when it comes to the name, it's very straightforward. AMX stands for the company, 13 for the targeted weight, and then whatever comes at the end is the caliber of the gun. So if it was a AMX 1357, it was a 57 mil. An AMX 1390, it was a 90 mil. Or an AMX 13105, it was a 105 mil. For this deep dive, we're going to mostly refer to the tank as the AMX 13 series, because the variation between the 57, the 75, the 90, and the 105 are really only two things. The turret of the 105 was different, and obviously the gun was different. But if you take a AMX 1357, AMX 1375, and AMX 1390, they are all the same tank except for the gun. So when we look at these tanks today, we're going to refer to them as the AMX 13 series and not specifically the AMX 13 105 unless it calls for it. The original need for the AMX 13 series was a small light tank that could be air portable to support paratroopers, fast, have a small engine, and would use a FL-10 oscillating turret with an auto-loading gun. The original model was the AMX 1375. Just like the AMX 50B and the 57 Heavy that we looked at in the previous episodes, the FL-10 oscillating turret worked in the same manner, with a upper portion that would go up and down, and a bottom portion that was fixed into that gave it the ability to go in a 360 degree circle. When talking about the oscillating turret design, all three tanks that we've covered up to this point, the 57 Heavy, the 50B, and the AMX 13 series, all three of these tanks had oscillating turrets. But the AMX 13 series is the only mass-produced tank that had an oscillating turret, seen as the 57 and the 50B never were mass-produced. The AMX 13 series was the most produced tank of the 20th century with an oscillating turret. And when you look at what France did with the oscillating turret design, France had the top two tanks by mass production with oscillating turrets, being the AMX 13 series and the EBR series reared tanks. No other country had anywhere near the amount of tanks that had oscillating turrets, and many other countries that did have tanks with oscillating turrets were using French oscillating turrets on their tanks. The AMX 1375, 1390, and 13105 that we're focusing on here were loaded with two circular bustles that rotated like a revolver, holding 6 rounds of ammunition each, for a total of 12 rounds of ammunition. It could fire these rounds of ammunition every 5 seconds, giving it fantastic rate of fire, but once the 12 rounds were used up, the AMX 13 would have to back up, the crew would have to get out, and they'd have to take the ammunition out of the tank chassis and put it into the bustle system. As you can guess, this took a considerable amount of time. So most AMX 13s would drive in pairs so that one was always loaded in case they got jumped or someone tried to attack them in their moment of weakness. No major changes were made to the AMX 13 tanks from its introduction in 1952 all the way up to 1985. The only minor changes that were made in that time frame were both in the early to mid 60s, where it went from a 75 mil to a 90 mil, the F3L52 gun, and the export model AMX 13 105 came out in the early 60s with the 105mm L-57 and a larger FL12 turret to house the bigger gun. Those were the only two notable changes from 1952 to 1985. From 1952 to 1985, the main characteristics of this tank stayed the same. Armor was up to 40mm thick at the thickest point. It had an 8-cylinder gasoline liquid-cooled SOFAM engine, giving it 250 horsepower. It had an operational range of up to 248 miles or 400 kilometers and a top speed of up to 37 miles an hour. This would be on like a road, not off-road, and which is 60 kilometers an hour. All this remained the same to 1985 when a whole host of changes were made and it became an export-only tank. France retired it from service in 1985. And the changes made for export was it got a new diesel engine with a better range of up to 372 miles and a new top speed of 39 miles an hour, a new fully automatic transmission, and hydro-pneumatic suspension. These new changes to the AMX 13 series gave it a new top speed of 39 miles per hour or 64 kilometers per hour, a new range of up to 372 miles or 600 kilometers. This gave the tank better off-road reliability, speed, and consistency on all terrains. Before we wrap up this tank review, I want to talk about some of the notable variants that popped up on this tank platform. Remember, there were close to 100 different variants that were tried by the 25 countries that bought these tanks. It should be noted that most of the export models for the AMX 13 were armed with the 90mm or the 105mm. And the 105mm, the AMX 13 105, was an export-only model from the beginning. France never used the 13105, both the early and the late. Some notable AMX 13s are the AMX 1375 armed with SS-11 anti-tank guided missiles. This was simply called the AMX 13 SS-11. There was the AMX DCA, which was an anti-air model armed with two 30mm autocannons. There was also a version with a Chaffee turret and an AMX chassis. There was an AMX hot version, an early version with 4 rockets per side, and then a late version that had 3 rockets per side, and many other variants, too many to even talk about in this video. After World War II ended, many nations had troubles coming up with tanks for the front lines. Designs were trialed and errored left and right, and many nations tried to come up with an oscillating turret design and failed. The AMX 13 was not only one of the only tanks mass-produced with an oscillating turret, but it was also a great platform. It was a light tank, a tank destroyer, anti-air, recon, support. It was anything that you needed it to be. If you found this video interesting, hit the like button. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. It helps. I plan to get 2 of these videos out a month. Thanks for watching.